Yeah, so I will be a little bit more in the technique. In fact, the technology of and the concept of CI CD. And then the goal is to present, in fact, how you can automate things to manage your proxy in Apigee, and also to apply some rules, because we are talking also about governance, and to standardize or to reinforce rules during your pipeline. So this is a global topics. There is a lot of slides. Sometimes I will go fast or too fast to slide, but you will see that I want to make this presentation very useful for you. So the list of the tools maybe is not so much interesting to present tools one by one, but at the end you will have the list and you can reuse or implement this tool or this other one. So it can be, I hope, useful for you. And again, feel free to interrupt also if needed. So how I can develop with Apigee. The first thing, and maybe the easiest thing to do, is to use the web UI. Using UI, you can have a very easy to use interface. You can do some drag and drop. You can create flow with drag and drop using out of the box policy, and then just have to configure the attribute of policy. So it's very easy to create a proxy. You have access to online documentation. You have also access to the trace tool. So it's something that is very easy to use, almost when we start, in fact, to use Apigee. The problem with this kind of UI, it's we have no trust of what you do. Of course, we have an audit log to be able to know who changed this proxy, at what time it was done, etc. But what is the difference between two releases? For example, we have access on the two releases of the same proxy, but I cannot do a diff between the two releases. If I want to do a rollback, of course I can do it, but I have to again to do it manually. So this is not a way to work as a global team working on the centralized platform. And for that, we have, of course, to automate and to use more DevOps approach with the CI CD pipeline to be able to answer, in fact, all these questions we could have in part of the deployment of your proxy. If we consider also the personas and goal of these different personas in the CI CD approach, of course, we have the developers. And the role of the developers, of the development team, is to be able to deploy and iterate on the application in an agile mode and more fast. That means we have to be able to produce, update, evolution on application, evolution on API, more and more in a more and more agile way. That means maybe every day I want to push a little modification, but I want to be able to do it in every day, not to wait at the end of the month to do it. So developer can take a real advantage of using a CI CD pipeline. The operation also, it's another persona with a lot of interest in the pipeline also, because this is a way to have a look of what is deployed, how it is deployed, and maybe to reinforce some standardization in terms of security, in terms of name, for example, of proxy, why not? And in terms of policy that will be embedded into the proxy. So what we want to guarantee to operation team is developer can do more and more things, but always in the good way, as though it was defined at the enterprise level. And of course, now, today, we cannot speak about API without speaking about security. And then again, I can be sure that what is deployed is secure. I want to have a guarantee on that, to be sure that all the policies that have to be deployed in terms of threat protection, maybe authentication, authorization, are well deployed in my CI CD. So the security team have also a lot of interest into the CI CD pipeline. I don't want to do I don't know a CI CD course, of course, on the what is the concept of CI CD, of the topics we could have around the CI CD, but just to reinforce 3 pillars, in fact, on this foundation. The first thing, it's what is the role of the configuration management, why continuous integration, and why continuous testing. This is the 3 part, and I will be very fast on these topics. It's not something that it's related only to Apigee. Apigee is part on this CI CD and DevOps approach. So this is standard, but we have to keep in mind. So the first thing about configuration management is reproducibility and traceability. I want to be able to redeploy all my environment the same way I did it before. I want to reproduce what I did in test, maybe to reproduce it in Q&A, to reproduce it in pre-prod, and maybe after that in prod, exactly the same way. And of course, if you do it manually, we cannot be sure that you will do exactly the same environment after environment. So this is the first thing, the first goal that we want to achieve. Doing exactly the same every time I want to redeploy my environment. And the second thing, it's traceability and maybe auditability also. That means I want to be sure that of what I did yesterday. If there is an issue in production, I want to understand what happened between the version that works well and the new version that have a bug, for example. So I want to understand who deployed, what was deployed, and I have access to the previous version of the proxy and the new version of the proxy to be able to compare both. And this is something that is very important. And you will see in the CI CD the fact that we can store artifacts to have this traceability, to be able to give this vision of what I did yesterday is something that is very important. From a configuration management benefit, of course, you can use all this of what I said on different use cases. And for example, the fact that we can recreate an environment from a white page in a disaster recovery story. This is something that is very important, of course. The higher quality, also the fact that we will not have any more manual action on the interface, but everything it's written in code in the pipeline, so we can test 1, 2, 3 to be sure that the next time I will use it, it will be perfect, and it will be always perfect because I will reuse the same deployment code. And of course, same for capacity management or respond to defect, to be able to roll back to the previous version. This kind of benefits we will have this with the configuration management. From a continuous integration point of view, the goal is to be able to deploy more often a small update. That means before waiting a month to push a huge update and to change everything on what is running in production, I want to be able to deploy small update every day if needed. That means not to wait some time to be able to deploy. And for that, of course, I need a code repository as a true source of my code. And keep in mind that an Apigee proxy it's like a source code. We will manage it like a source code. It's exactly the same. With automation, with self-testing, do not automating something without testing automatically what you are deploying. This is something that is key. I will talk about that just after. But no automation without testing. This is the sentence we have to keep in mind. So to be able to push as often I want my update in a standard way, in an automated way, this is something that is very important for developers, and also the standardization part is for the operation. The benefits: less bug, more reactive, more agile in terms of development, to be able to produce maybe some updates, some to react, to respond to the business need more faster when they need something. So this is all this kind of benefits we will have with continuous integration for code, of course, for application code, but also for Apigee. There is nothing special, I would say, for Apigee. Last pillar, I would say, of CI CD is the continuous testing. We could test a lot of things. We could do some different kind of tests. We try to figure out in this slide of the category of tests we could have and how we can test, in fact, from we can do it automatically or manually sometimes. And if you want to test maybe some usability of your new web UI, of course, the usability, it may be not automated. Maybe yes, maybe not, but maybe you want to have a feedback from the end user that it's beautiful, it's very easy to use. This button is too small, this kind of thing that maybe you will need a manual testing. But for API, of course, we can automate all the tests we want. It can be some functional and acceptance test, and we will see that with the integration test or BDD, behavior-driven development test. It can be also some unit test, more technical, more on the technology phase of the test itself. It can be functional unit test or maybe non-functional unit test like performance testing. Why not? If we want to be sure that we deploy a proxy, an Apigee proxy in production, and of course, behind this proxy, there is also backend, and we want to be sure that we can achieve, I don't know, 300 TPS with this flow, in fact, proxy plus a backend. Then at the end of the deployment, we can run this kind of performance testing or load testing if we need. So different kind of tests. I will try to illustrate in my demonstration all these kind of tests we could have. Like that, we can you can build your pipeline as you want. Another thing that is very important, it's Apigee does not impose a pipeline. That means what are the pipeline you will use to automatically deploy an Apigee configuration or an Apigee proxy, the one you want. Sorry. That means if you already use Jenkins, you could still use Jenkins. If you are using Circle CI, you could still use Circle CI. Same for GitHub, same for Azure, same for GitLab, as you want. That means we don't want to impose a way to automate, in fact, your Apigee deployment. And as the opposite, we want to be sure that we could use the pipeline you're already using. During the deployment, you will have to do some tests, some tasks, and of course, every time we will have some tools that can be used to maybe to edit the proxy, not in the UI but in your IDE. So you will need a development environment, and here you will need also a source code manager to be able to store in your code all the test tools, and we will see that just after, that you will need for static code analysis, for coverage testing. All these kind of tools can be used during these steps of the deployment. A way to deploy, of course, your proxy, and to talk to Apigee to create some configuration or to deploy a new proxy, to test what was deployed, to publish artifact, to be able to prove what I did during my deployment. And maybe also we can think about updating a documentation in a developer portal or maybe elsewhere, where with the documentation, like that, we can have a documentation up to date for this new proxy or this new API that was deployed. So now we are going to see all these kind of tools. This tool can be tools provided by specific editor. We can recognize Postman, for example, here. It can be some open source tools, and we can see GSint, for example, here. And also I will present the tools provided by Apigee to be able to build this kind of pipeline. Something also that you have to keep in mind is that Apigee provide an Apigee API. That means all the things you are able to do using the web UI, you can do it using an API. Of course, it's a low-level interface to talk with the management place. We have to use curl, for example, or to create your own program, your own application, to embed this API to create a way to talk with the management plane. But you could always automate everything with Apigee because you have all the Apigee API needed for that. The tools I will present are not, in fact, this API, this low-level interface. It's more something that it's developer-oriented or CI CD oriented. But keep in mind that you can do everything with Apigee API. Deploy a proxy, create an application, get analytics, get alerting from monitoring information. You can do everything with this kind of API. So this is something that can reassure you if you want to be sure that you can automate something in Apigee. First, what does it mean to deploy? What can I deploy, in fact, into Apigee to have something that can be run into Apigee? In Apigee, we are talking about proxy and shared flow to be able to share some policy between proxy. But this is only one part of a running environment inside Apigee. This proxy maybe needs some caching or KVM or target server. That means some variable that you want to manage at the environment level. That means it's not code, it's more a configuration, it's a key value information sometimes that you will have also to deploy because this proxy needs, for example, this KVM. We have also on Apigee, we talk about the API product, and we know that a product, it's a bundle of API proxy. So maybe after deploying 2 proxy, I will have to create 1 product to be able to promote this, to publish this product into a developer portal, for example. And for that, of course, we can do it also in the pipeline. We can create an app that subscribe to this product, and we can create a developer that create an app that subscribe to this product. That means all this line, all this object can be automatically created into Apigee. Maybe you will deploy only KVM and proxy, for example, and product and application will be deployed in another pipeline, or maybe product in another pipeline and application, it will be done by the application developer using a developer portal. But you can do it from end to end if you want, using the same tool. That means the API management, CLI, or something like a Maven tool, for example. So we have a specific tool to be able to deploy the proxy, and we have quite the same tool to be able to deploy the rest of the configuration, KVM, product, application, and developer. So let's have a look on this tool now. I will go back on this slide just after. The first thing, it's Maven. To be able to deploy a proxy, we propose to use Maven. You know Maven, it's a standard tool in the Java developer environment, but it can be used also to deploy not only Java, but also some other things like Apigee proxy. And for that, Apigee propose specific Maven plugin to manage configuration, KVM, application, product, target server, all this kind of configuration object, and also to be able to deploy the proxy itself. So we have 2 plugins. You can use one or the other, depending of what you want to do. And for that, we will provide a configuration file to deploy configuration or to deploy the proxy itself. So Maven is a way to deploy proxy. Sometime I was asked if we provide some Terraform module to deploy proxy. This is not our approach. Terraform, it's more infrastructure as code and not configuration as code or program as code, I would say. So we provide some Terraform module, but to be able to deploy Apigee infrastructure, not to deploy Apigee configuration. So for that, we are more on the developer environment, in developer domain, and for that we provide developer tool like a plugin, Maven plugin, for example. If you search on Google, of course, you could find some people that are developed Terraform module to deploy Apigee proxy. It runs. Of course, Terraform can do that, but it is not supported by Google. It is not provided by Google. But if you want, with all the warning I can push, you can use this kind of Terraform module. But this is not a Google managed project to be able to provide this Terraform module to deploy Apigee proxy. We have also some CLI to be able to deploy in an easy way, to deploy a proxy or a configuration. We provide currently two CLI. The first one is SACMesser, and you have the link every time for the tool. SACMesser, it's more developer-oriented CLI that allow you to, if you are not very familiar with Maven, for example, SACMesser can do it for you. That means you can say SACMesser deploy something, and then automatically this CLI will use Maven to deploy your proxy in the Maven way. So it's something that it's very, very easy to use in the CLI way. You can also use it in a script, in shell script, for example, and it's more about deployment. So typically, what we want to achieve with a pipe CLI, with a pipeline, sorry. So this is one way to use a CLI. We have another one, Apigee CLI. It's more, I would say, it's developer, but more administrator oriented. That means you can also retrieve some analytics, do this kind of thing. You can deploy proxy, of course, but you can do more. So it's more a full administrative capability CLI and maybe less developer oriented. And also from admin point of view, we are now working to incorporate Apigee into the standard G-Cloud CLI, Google Cloud CLI. So you can already use it. You cannot do everything with this G-Cloud command at the moment, but you can see that you can start to do something like deploy a proxy, view a deployment. So I don't know, to be honest, I don't know, but I think we will use more and more this G-Cloud CLI because this is the standard of Google Cloud. So Apigee will be more incorporated in this standard CLI. The API, of course, we have documentation to have the list of all the API, and at the end, a sum up of what you can do with different CLI for different kind of use case. If you want to work on your own laptop, you can develop on your own laptop. So you can use the web UI, and to start using Apigee is easier. But after that, maybe you will use always the same canvas, the same template of proxy, and it will be easier for you to use your own IDE to work on your laptop to modify and to create a new one starting from this template. And for that, we provide some interface, some plugin to work with IDE, and we are more VS Code oriented again. So VS Code, it's a very powerful IDE, and you can, for example, install some Git, Maven, G-Cloud maybe plugin into this IDE. And we also provide some Apigee tool as a VS Code plugin. The one that you can see on the video, it's a snippet generator. If you want to create a policy into your proxy flow, then you can enter API dash, and you will see all the policy available, and you just have to select the one you want and configure it the same way you are working on the web UI, but this is inside VS Code. We also provide a full local development environment, and you have the reference to the documentation. That means that you can develop your proxy in VS Code and run your proxy also in VS Code. You don't have to deploy it in the instance of Apigee in the cloud, but you can test it. So it can be very useful for a developer to create a proxy, test, make a lot of tests, maybe technical steps, maybe discover some new policy, try some new policy, and at the end, I want to push it in the dev environment because I want to share it with all the other developers. But first, I want to work locally on my side, and then for that, you can implement into your VS Code environment a full Apigee proxy and also gateway. You have a gateway running as a Docker container that can be used from VS Code to deploy your proxy and to call your proxy on localhost running really on your own laptop. Now, if we consider the test, this is something that is very critical. Apigee provide a Apigee proxy linter, a way to validate the quality of the code of your proxy, to be sure that your proxy respects some best practice rules or maybe some enterprise rule in terms of development. I'm really talking about the code of the Apigee proxy itself. So for that, you have Apigee Lint. This is an open source tool that you can use for free. And then this tool will generate this kind of report saying that, okay, I test all your proxy and there is 2 warnings based on the fact that you don't respect the naming rules, for example, of this kind of thing. And something that is very interesting, it's that you can create your own rules. That means if from an enterprise point of view, you want to impose that every proxy should have a spike arrest policy, I want to be sure before the deployment that my proxy embed this spike arrest policy, then you can create a new rule in Apigee Lint, checking that this policy is there before the deployment. If you want to impose a naming convention, you can do it. And you can do whatever you want, in fact, because it's a simple plugin architecture for this tool based on the JavaScript. So you can have easily some new rules you would like to test before the deployment. And more than this, now we are also providing Apigee Lint for VS Code. That means if you develop your proxy inside VS Code, then in an interactive way, it's just a menu here. You can test that what I do is currently correct. Before trying to deploy, I can validate that my proxy respects the enterprise rule, maybe to be sure that it's good from a proxy point of view. My proxy respect the best practice, respect the enterprise rules. Then I could try to deploy it just after. I don't know if you know, but Apigee allows you also to create your own policy based on standard language like JavaScript, Python, or Java. That means that in my proxy, I could have some Java code, Python code, or JavaScript code. So I have to also test and validate this kind of JavaScript, for example, code. So as an example, I put two tools to test your JavaScript. ESLint, this is a linter for JavaScript. So you could have in your proxy maybe a JavaScript policy, and you can validate the quality of this JavaScript code using this kind of linter. and you want maybe also to run some unit tests on this JavaScript policy, Apigee JavaScript policy. And for that, there is also some open source tool. ESLint is also an open source tool, and you have an open source tool, able to validate and test your JavaScript, like for example Mocha, that can be used to for JavaScript. And you could have the same for Python, and maybe the same for Java if you want to deploy some Java code or some Python code. At the end of the deployment, what is very important is also to be sure that it was deployed and it runs as expected, I would say. And for that, we propose a tool, Apigee, that it's an integration test, end-to-end integration test. We call my Apigee proxy that will call the backend, that will send a response back to the customer, to the application, the client application, and then it runs as expected. So Apigee is based on the Cucumber framework, an open source framework. And so Apigee provides a BDD way, behavior-driven development way, to test your API. That means that you can write some functional test in a human language, or not really human, but not so technical language, to describe the behavior of the API. And then you can say, for example, if I call my API with this parameter, I will get a payload as a JSON with this kind of format, with this kind of size, for example. So you can write as a user, I call with this parameter, I get a 200 with this result. And if you think about design first approach of your API, that means before developing my API on my backend, before exposing my API on Apigee, I have to first design my API. That means I have first to create my open API specification as a documentation specification of what I have to do on my backend, what I have to implement on my backend, or what I have to implement on Apigee. Then, when you create this specification, in the same time, you can create the test of the specification. In your specification, you will say, this is my parameter. This is the result I will have in case of 200. This is the result I will have in case of 404 result error. And you can describe exactly the same in this testing language here to be sure that, okay, I have a specification, I will implement, I will deploy, then I already have the test I have to run to validate my deployment. So in this design first approach, this kind of BDD or TDD, test-driven development also approach, is something that can be very useful and very efficient for the integration testing. And you will have this kind of result. So here I'm in my project. So the goal is to say that I want to be able to deploy my proxy with automated deployment and automated testing, for example. As an example, I will use GitLab, but it's exactly the same with GitHub, with whatever. In fact, again, there is no dependency between Apigee and the specific pipeline. So if I look at my my GitLab project, I can see that there is different part in this project. The first here, this is the code of my proxy. So if I click on it, I will find exactly the same thing that I can see in the web UI. For example, the policies that are being used in this proxy. I can see, I don't know, the specification of this proxy. I can see the test I want to run against this proxy before and after the deployment. That means this is my project. And the thing that is very important, of course, it's the proxy itself and maybe the configuration associated with this proxy. And for example, here, I want to deploy my proxy, but also a target server object, an Apigee target server object, who will allows me to define my backend as a variable in my environment. So this is a configuration file. This is not the proxy, but as I said before, this is some configuration I need to be able to run my proxy after the deployment. So this is my my proxy and this configuration. We'll talk just after about how I can get this proxy here, to be clear. I have to create from starting from nothing, starting from a template, generating automatically. There is different way to generate this folder here, and we will talk about that just after. And there is different kind of file, and we will see this file just after. If I look at exactly the same on my own laptop using VS Code, there is again the proxy folder, the configuration folder that are here, and of course using GitLab. This is my my GitLab file. So in my GitLab file, we will scroll this file to explain how it works. The first thing is here you have variables that define the Apigee organization and Apigee environment that you will have to use as a target, and also the hostname that you will use as for testing, in fact. So it's very easy to deploy in one environment, and if you update this variable, you will deploy in another one. If you change this variable, you will deploy in another organization. So very easy to manage different environment as a target from my repo to this environment. So it's only a story of variables, so very easy. And as is very easy, I can also define a way to define, in fact, this variable automatically. And we can associate Apigee environment and Apigee organization to a branch policy in Git. For example, in my project, I have a main branch, and when I commit and push in this main branch, automatically I will deploy in production. I created also a test branch, and when I commit and push my code in this test Git branch, it will deploy in my test environment. I created also a pre-prod branch again, and when I commit push in pre-prod branch, this will deploy in the pre-prod environment. So you can, this is what I, as an example, what I created here. I use the name of the branch currently used for the deployment, and then define the target, the environment and the organization. So you can write it as you want. This is a for demo purpose, it's very simple here, but you can add this logic to automatically, based on where you are currently committed, then you will deploy your proxy. After that, there is different stage, and you can see that we can validate the specification itself. You can run some static code analysis for both the proxy and the JavaScript. We can run some unit tests for JavaScript policy. We can deploy the configuration, the hosted target configuration we have just seen before automatically. Then using the Maven approach, we can build and deploy the proxy on this organization. And at the end, we will run an integration test based on rule I was previously created during my design phase of my project. So it's very easy. You can see that quite every time. This is only a command line that can be used to validate my specification, run my Apigee lint test to validate the quality of my proxy, validate the quality of my JavaScript code, run some unit test of my JavaScript. So you can have this kind of pipeline that it's very easy to create and to maintain. And if I look at the result of this execution, in the deploy in the build menu of GitLab. Then I will see my pipeline, and you can see that all the steps I just show you are here. First, validate the specification. Okay, it's green. Then validate the code of my proxy code. It's green. My JavaScript code is green, etc., etc. And we want to be able to trace and to audit the deployment. So you said that it's okay for Open API specification. Prove it. So I just have to enter into the job, see the artifact that was generated during the execution of the job, maybe get this artifact here and have a look on it. And you will see that my spectral linter analyze of my Open API specification is okay. There is no error. There is some warning. Maybe I will have to use operation ID in my specification itself, but it's okay. And I will have the same audit capabilities for all the jobs that are here. And if I want to be sure that the deployment was good, I just have to go to this integration test here. Again, check the artifact that was created during the execution, and then have a look on it. And I want to test, it's an API to get some airport information. I just want to list all the airport. So I wrote these rules. When I call /airport, I should get a 200 with array of response of size of length 50. It's okay, it's green. I also want to test that if I ask information about a non-existing airport, I will get a 404 error code. It's done. I tested it. I run the test. It's okay because I get a 404 response code. So in 1 month, maybe, if someone told me that, did you test the deployment on this Wednesday? I can prove it. It's part of the pipeline. In fact, it's stored in the pipeline itself, and I can show to the people what I did 1 month before. Of course, if you want, you can store it elsewhere, not in the pipeline itself. But I used to do it in this pipeline. So the last thing I want to explain, because when you start with working with Apigee, of course, you will not create a full pipeline, fully automated with full of tests, with governance for all the people working with Git and things like that. But I will explain, in fact, the different steps you will use, probably, using Apigee. At the beginning, it's not easy to create a proxy. So as I said before, you will use your web UI. And it's perfect for that. You can learn easily all the policies, the logic of the proxy itself, the flow, the conditional flow, and that's okay. After that, from this proxy editor, you are able to export the code. So maybe you will create the proxy in this interface, and then next step, you want to use Git for that. So you will create it, export the code, and then store the code into Git. And the next step will say, okay, now I can update the code using my IDE. This is the next step. Now I'm able to define the way I will work with my UI. I don't need UI anymore. I just have to get the code itself and change one thing, add a policy, change the backend, change the base path, for example, and I will have the same. So you could use your local development instead of the UI, maybe for the standard proxy, and for non-standard proxy, you will have to use again the web UI. Maybe also in part of your automation flow, you will want not to reuse some things that you did on the UI, but to generate the proxy starting from the specification. And for that, we provide this tool, Open API to Apigee, that is able to create a proxy starting from a specification. And then you just have to give the name of the YAML file. of the specification, and automatically it will create these folders and file that you can use in your IDE. And of course, you can do the same, with Apigee CLI. So currently there is 2 ways to do the same. And of course, you can do the same to be able to expose the SOAP backend. So there is a WSDL to Apigee command line that able to take a WSDL, your SOAP definition, and then generate a proxy to expose it as REST or as SOAP into Apigee. So 2 ways to automate the creation of the proxy itself. The next step will be to say, okay, now I don't want to use my IDE anymore. I want to create template automatically and maybe to change only few variables in my template. So we have some template solution, and you can create some template or templatization solution, and we provide as an example in the DevRel Apigee GitHub project repository a proxy template script, and you can say like that, this is my template. I want to manage the resource not found, to be able to manage course, to be able to manage, I don't know, OAuth, token verification. You define your template and you said, this is my template, and automatically this will generate a proxy, not an empty proxy, only the structure, but the structure plus all the policy you define in your template. And the last step, maybe in terms of this is the goal that you will want to achieve if you want to give, in fact, the power to the application developer, maybe in the federated model. That means that the centralized team don't want to create any more proxy for the backend developer. And then you can create a portal for the backend developer, and then the backend developer just have to come here, upload their specification, and automatically this will generate the proxy, store the proxy in Git, generate start the pipeline, and deploy the proxy into Apigee. That means that for a non-production environment, of course, there is no need of validation, but for a non-production environment, application developer don't need help from anybody from the centralized team to deploy something in Apigee, and they don't have to know Apigee. They don't have to learn Apigee. They have a centralized portal that automates everything with a very easy to use web UI. So probably you will have this journey starting with a simple way to create proxy, and a more and more automated way to create proxy, and maybe to give this proxy generation task in self-service to the backend developer. I will share with you this. This is my GitHub repo. You will find exactly the same scenario I showed to you. Deploy airport API with automatic testing for all this kind of pipeline. That means if you already have an Azure pipeline, Circle CI, GitHub, GitLab, Google Cloud Build, of course, or Jenkins, then you can download this project, or clone more exactly this project, and then you will have a starting point to create your automation. Just have to replace my proxy by your proxy, remove maybe the configuration if you don't need it, and then adapt the test, all this kind of thing. But you will have something that is ready to use for training, and maybe as a starting point for your own pipeline.